Hey everyone, welcome back to the Daily Try. Today I'm so delighted to have on my next guest, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on right now after the huge news of the PTO T100 Triathlon World Tour. Tim Hemming, in my opinion, is one of the most credible journalists in the sport. He's been in journalism for 25 years, written for The Times, Telegraph, and has covered a large variety of sports. He's balanced yet critical, comprehensive, witty, and challenging. And if you find yourself like me saying, wow, that was a good article. Check the author. It's probably written by Tim. Tim now writes for Triathlete 220 Triathlon, and he's the only person I recommend that you follow on Twitter or X or whatever it is. Also, you might recognize him recently in a good few of PTO's recent videos.
Taylor Nib on the racecourse is as ruthless as they come.
Tim, as I said to you before we hit record here, I've always been a secret fan of your work, so good to have you on.
Travis, thank you. I'm blushing. Can we just wrap it up now? Can we just leave it there? That's fine for me.
I'm not letting that
Okay.
happen because I really do want to talk to you about this. It's some huge news. Did it surprise you? I think you were there in person, right?
Yeah, it was a very much typical of the way the PTO do things these days. It's very professional, a great show, a great event, uber positive, which it needs, right? It can be easy to be cynical about this sport, but a great presentation. They had Alistair Brownlee there, Lucy Charles Barkley, two of the biggest names in the sport. So just for anyone who wasn't there or didn't see it, I drove across to London myself, parked up, went to where the City Hall, which is effectively the mayor's building, and it's also going to be the location for the London event, the T100 London event.
Oh, cool.
They monopolized that for the launch, I suppose. And outside, you have this big T100 kind of like polystyrene mold, which is like, okay, so this is what the day's about. This is the big rebrand. And then, again, Chris Kermode, as the president, was doing his thing in terms of introduction, and Sam Renouf, and anyone who's heard Sam knows how sort of slick and polished he is. The athletes talked a little bit about it. They got some endemic press there. They got some international press there as well. And they launched the whole shebang. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about, I guess.
Yeah. So you've been around the sport for quite a while. Did it feel different, this announcement? And Chris Kermode made a huge statement there saying, we are going to make triathlon, the PTO T100, one of the biggest sports entertainment products in the world. What do you think about
Yeah. Well, I think that people raised a few eyebrows to that comment.
that?
100%. And I saw a couple of articles that were headlined with that as well. And I think, I certainly raised eyebrows on that. I mean, that's bold ambition, absolutely. Chris Kermode, I'm sure everybody knows by now because he's not shy of telling people, comes from the ATP background in tennis, and was instrumental in launching the end of season London event, which was hugely, so successful. He just kept there for more than a decade. I think they played the men's finals in London. So if anyone has got kind of the history in sport to be able to turn stuff around, then him as the president there, like I said earlier, he's suave and he's polished. And so it may be, we'll see whether it comes to be bluster or whether it comes to be the truth. I would love it, and so I'm sure you would, if we made even a tenth of the way towards that and fulfilled that. I think, did he say top 10 or something, top 10 sports entertainment at one point? I would just love that they could get the T100 series away, and we're sat down in that first event, and we're going to talk about this, I know, but the first event in Miami, and we all look at it and we go, wow, what a brilliant broadcast. What racing, what commentary, what a show. And I can't wait for the next one. Where's the next one? What date's the next one? That's the kind of vibe that we want. I know that's what PDO want to create. So yeah, it's right now, we've got to get behind it.
I totally agree. Okay, so one of the biggest things we were waiting on for this launch was the locations. I think we'll dive into that first. What did you think? First reaction?
I think they do on one hand. And then as you pick apart the locations, which we can do if you like, they do it on one hand, and then there's an argument to say they also don't, if we're going to be super, We can be cynical or we can be uber positive, and we can take either approach to this. So if we start with Miami, we've seen that be a season opener as Clash for the last few years, and it's actually produced some amazing racing, right? I know Emma Pallant-Brown having a meltdown on the tarmac, and there's a couple of Brits did well. Did Sam Long smash it one year and, off the front? Frodeno winning that race, I'm sure you do a couple of years ago. As a sort of, the same way that Ironman have that kind of curtain raiser at Oceanside, and everyone's excited because it's like the early Ironman race. I think PTO, the T100s, I mean, I'm calling it T100. If anyone doesn't know, that's the rebranded name, right? So, and you've done a great video on this explaining this already after Tuesday's announcement, so they can go and watch that. But I think if Miami can be the equivalent of that, that's really exciting. The one caveat with Miami is that PTO have ownership of 6 of these 8 locations and races right now. So they effectively own the lock stock. So, and as they've said, and it's a 3 to 5 year plan for those where they have the contracts. I believe Miami and one other race, which is in California, that I know that you thought was going to be Alcatraz. And let's be honest, we all think right now it's going to be Alcatraz. And my understanding is they just need to rubber stamp on that. So if it's not Alcatraz, it's not for a want to try. It's because whatever, it didn't work out. That's my belief anyway. But fingers crossed. But those are the only 2 that they don't have that control. So, if there's things don't work, then maybe they don't go back the next year. But I think in terms of locations, you want to embed locations that you can say you go back to and they start to build, and they not just build the narrative of the season, but building the narrative year on year. So that's the first one. Do you want to go through the other 7, or how do you want to do it? It could take some time.
That could take a bit. Yeah. I think, just first impressions, I personally think they've got a really good lineup. I think maybe over time, they'll develop the broadcast and being able to tell the story of that location and what happened last year here at this race. I think one of the best things they announced was that they have a lot of these locations for 3 to 5 years, or all of the locations. So I think that's a great thing that we'll see. But the one that I did want to talk about is the grand final. And I mentioned a little bit on my show that I did about the announcement was, I think this is like going to be the showpiece of the year. It's the grand final, like, is this location going to be big enough? Is it going to be the Kona or Nice of the PTO? And we've heard it's going to be in the Middle East. What have you heard about that? What do you think about the grand final?
I mean, again, you teased it, didn't you, in your last show? Because I have had a watch, and you think it's probably going to be Oman. My sources tell me the same. I think it slightly depends on momentum, how much momentum the series picks up over the season. So, are we going to be believing that, let's say, the race for the world title is a foregone conclusion, in which case it could be, therefore, not as much suspense over it. Or if it's building to a crescendo, it could be fantastic. It's in November. Is it middle of November, I think, off the top of my head, for that date? So it's like, will we have triathlon fatigue by that point? And we'll actually be like, do you know what? Ironman 70.3 Worlds is a fortnight later. So there is still more triathlon to come. So I think the jury's out on that. And if it does turn out to be, Oman, we do know the Ironman have got I think Ironman's got a race there in a fortnight's time.
Yep.
They've raced there before. I know there's been UTMB qualifying events there, which is obviously now part of the Ironman family as well. So it's not an area that is endurance sport is alien to. And my travels to the Middle East have been Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Qatar. I haven't been to Oman, but my understanding is that you can also create some pretty interesting courses in Oman as well. It's a little hillier terrain, and it's a bit more interesting. So if that does turn out to be the location, then yeah, could be good. Could be good.
I like to hear that. None of us, though, would really care about it or care about these locations if they hadn't have got the athletes. And I think that kind of shocked us all with the lineup that they ended up with. So there are some interesting storylines that come out of the athletes that they got. What did you think? Did you expect them to get, for example, all the women that they wanted?
Initially, I didn't, but then when I thought about it more, I was like, and this is me being a slightly cynical journalist here, I was thinking there is no reason not to sign this contract, because there's no downside to not signing. And you can be somebody like Christian Blumenfeld, who hasn't signed on the men's side, because really all the women did sign up, but there wasn't anyone, I don't believe there was anyone that turned it down. But on the men's side, Christian has turned that down. I think that's should get quite a bit of respect for that, because in saying that he's going to focus on the Olympic Games and Kona, which we understand is what he's saying, he is actually saying that he can't commit to the tour.
Mm,
Again, I do apologize for my cynicism on this, but there are a number of athletes who have signed contracts who I feel it might be slightly fanciful to suggest that they're going to be able to complete 6 T100 races this year. But because the money, which is an average of around, let's say, 70,000 US
yeah.
to be contracted to take part in the series, and if you're a contracted athlete early, I know there's dispensation for Olympic athletes, but for the the pure non-drafting athletes, they have to do a minimum of 6 races. Then you're committing to that at this stage. You're getting that early payment up front, but then maybe Ironman comes in, or maybe you get an injury, or maybe you're not quite, like feeling it. And then what happens if you drop out of one race, or you don't quite feel like you can compete or give your best? And there's a lot of travel involved. So yeah, like this feels like I'm undermining the athlete somewhat, and I really don't mean it to be that way. But I do think if you or I had a contract put in front of us, why would we not sign?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point and a fair one, honestly, yeah. Do you think, did you think that $3 million, that 75,000 kind of breakdown per athlete? I know it's not going to be exactly that, but do you think that's part of what got them across to sign?
It's 100% of the fact that they've got money on the table, which is effectively appearance money for the tour. Because if we wind the clock back to formation of the PTO, which was formerly the PTU, and the idea of it being an athlete body, they said for a long time that they wouldn't pay any appearance money. They're not going to entice a particular athlete to a race. I remember the first race they put on in Daytona, in the height of the pandemic, where they got athletes, and it was all, the idea was all up front and above board, so everybody knew what was being spent, and one athlete wasn't going to be favored ahead of the other. They've obviously changed tact, and as they've evolved,
Yep.
but now it is about since triathlon's inception, appearance money has been paid. Challenger off to it every year, to get the best athletes to turn up. So I guess that was a national path for them to go. But yeah, like, it does make sense, because it's guarantee and security for athletes who are, now getting well paid, which is a great thing.
Yep.
But for generations, that wasn't the case for long distance athletes. So 100%, that's made a huge difference. And in terms of that, we're talking 70,000. I think we're sort of going a mid range there. And my understanding is that it was generally done off the rankings, so that the athletes that if you were slightly higher rank, you got paid slightly more money, and it was pretty much stuck to that. I don't think there was necessarily much room for negotiations and bartering. My intuition would tell me that perhaps athletes like Brownlee and Charles Barkley, who were there at the launch, maybe had a bit of wriggle room to be quote unquote ambassadors for PTO, and maybe could get a little more extra that way. That's just pure conjecture on my part. Yeah, that's my thoughts. And 3 million into the contracts, they will have thought this thing through to the nth degree. So I think makes sense. It looks like they've had 7 million to spend on athletes this year, 3 million into the contracts, 4 million in prize money for the races themselves, and then the prize pool at the end. And there you go. It's not a bad payday, right?
At all. And I mean, we'll get into criticisms a little bit later on, but 7 million, one of the biggest criticisms I've heard of the PTO is like, are they just throwing money? Is this going to be sustainable? Will we see it last? That seems like a huge number, but
yeah, I mean, that very question is the question that has been asked again since, Mike Moritz put in all his money all those what seems like years ago now. I asked it again to Sam Renouf on Tuesday, which was, is this sustainable? And his view is absolutely. They would not be putting on an 8-event series looking to go to 10 events next year if they didn't have the backing from the investors to do that for the, let's call it, my words, not his, but let's call it at least the medium term, for the next 2 to 3 years, right? You've got to give this, which is really their first proper stab. I know they had a few events in the last couple of years, but pales into what they're delivering in 2024. You've got to give this 2 or 3 years to give it a chance. And then if it's not catching light in the way that they want, or the investors aren't or the way the investors don't want, sorry, then I guess things will change. But until then, as Alistair Brownlee said on Tuesday, there's no better time to be a long distance athlete.
I think another reason that got athletes across the line, I'm sure you might agree, is the calendar, that how they laid it out and how it fits around. But also, there's a couple of contention points with the Ironman World Championships. We got a couple of clashes there, right, at the key moments of the year. A lot of these athletes are going to try and do both.
I think there's athletes there that feel that they maybe want to do both, and the reality is that as the season plays out, there's going to be some curveballs that come in that mean they probably can't do both, or at least they probably can't do both well. There might be one or two athletes that, I mean, this is part of the intriguing thing. We've got however many contracted athletes right now, like we got 40, we got 32, I can't remember, 16 or 20, how many we got, or whatever many we got.
40.
Yeah, exactly, right. And how many of them are still going to be standing by the time we get to Kona and Nice? I know there's certainly athletes who are looking to do both, right? You're contracted to the PTO T100 tour, so you've got to give that a good go. So let's say like Rudy von Berg Jr., a good example of somebody who wants to have a go at Kona this year, and is, given how he performed in Nice last year and how he's performed at Ironman generally, he's got a real opportunity to make a mark in Kona. How can he fit that in with the T100 tour? He's a good example, because you've said there around the Kona, Ironman World Champions in Kona for the men is essentially a clash with the T100 Las Vegas, okay? So top line, we're looking, well, okay, well, that's one of the, if you want to do Kona, you can't do Vegas. So you then have got to do, you've got to do 6 of the other 7. But the reality is, for somebody like Rudy von Berg Jr., Ibiza, for him to realistically race Ibiza, which is a few weeks earlier, would make no sense if he wanted to do well at Kona, because if he's training in the States, he then has to travel to Europe for the Ibiza race, have all the travel back, and then travel on to Kona. It just makes no sense in terms of the Kona preparation. So actually, that's knocked out 2 T100 races for him. So therefore, he needs to turn up to every other race in the PTO Tour. You see my point? So the guy's got zero wriggle room, absolutely zero wriggle room, if he wants to do both. Plus, he's got to qualify by doing an Ironman somewhere. So that's, and you saw what Lucy Charles Barkley said. I'm not doing the Ironman World Championship in Nice. In fairness to her, and I don't know if you've seen today, but she's had to issue a statement because she's had criticism for that. I have no idea why she's had to issue that statement. It makes no sense to me. And in fairness to her, directly after Kona last year, when she won, obviously everyone knows about that. What a victory. She said she's not going to be doing Nice. Very slim chance she's going to be doing Nice. And it makes perfect sense not to do Nice when you see that she's contractually obliged to do 6 of these T100 races. So, all credit to her for making that choice early. And I think some other athletes could find themselves in the suit. But I know, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Rudy actually managed to get his spot for Kona, I think at Ironman Florida. I think
Good
so.
point. Good point.
I think he's one of the only ones who might, be able to, but like you said, no wiggle room at all, and if he wants to do well at the T100 and Kona, I think that's going to be really tough, because you have to perform at every race. To me, I think the only thing, and this was in one of the criticisms that I've heard, is that they only scored at 4 of the T100 races. So a lot of people thinking athletes might turn up and not, really race the race and just train through it. I think that might be their only saving grace if they want to do well at Kona, or Nice. And as we've seen before, I think that still doesn't really work with all the travel involved. It is a world tour, and that takes a lot out of athletes. And to win Kona or Nice, in today's triathlon, I mean, it's just, you have to be 110%. And I think athletes personally who really focus one or the other will do the best.
I'm glad you pulled me up on Von Berg having already qualified. That shows you're on the ball, so I appreciate that. And I apologize to the listeners for throwing in why that was wrong. So thank you.
No, all good. All good. Okay, so we said they pretty much got all the athletes on the women's side, and I'll dive deeper into you with that. But on the men's side, I think, and I mentioned this in my video, they didn't get Christian and Gustav. Now, Christian, we kind of heard of already, but Gustav, I think, surprised a lot of us. What are your thoughts on that and his season in general? You can expand on that a little bit more, but I was really surprised. Do you think it's just going to be one of those athletes who's a wild card for every event?
Apologies for the pause. I literally just checked my email when you asked me that question because it's a question I've asked the PTO. Did you approach Gustav?
Okay.
And I haven't got the answer back yet as to whether he was actually offered a contract. So I don't know. Honestly, I would have to say question mark over his over him, over his form, his fitness, his health in general, and probably just where he is in terms of mindset right now. With last year being such a difficult year for him. With he lost his mum, he had everything was on such a high in 2022 when he became Ironman World Championship, and then everything went basically. He said like it went wrong from the get go in 2023, and obviously the biggest thing of all was losing his mother. Yeah, like I think we just need to give him some time, Travis. To be honest, see what he wants to do. He may. I think he's probably still eyeing up the Olympics. Like last time I spoke to him, that there was still an outside chance for him to get a shot at the Olympic Games, to get a place there. So that will come. We'll find out about that in the early season racing or in the WTCS and the World Cups and what he has to do effectively to get that second Norwegian spot alongside Christian in the team for Paris. If he does that, I wish him the best of luck. I still think he's a really good short course athlete, contrary to what a lot of people think. Yeah. You look back at some of the results that he's achieved. He's not an old athlete. I think he's got bags of talent and can really still do well at draft legal racing. And maybe the other thing is, I was thinking that maybe he's just taking the pressure off, and maybe he's going to go and do Challenge Roth, for example, right?
Yeah.
Take up an invite. They would love to have him. Take a chilled year, just see how it all pans out, get himself healthy, get himself right, go and do that race, have a great day. And yeah, but that's my take on Gustav. I'm so sorry I don't have better answers. Like I said, I did ask PTO and I'm yet to receive a reply on that one.
That will be an interesting reply. I think that would be interesting to know. And I agree with you. As you were saying that, I was just like, I feel like a lot of people and myself be like, why not? But you put yourself in their shoes, and signing a contract like that to race 8 races around the world when right now there is so much opportunity to race wherever you want and however you want as a pro athlete. So you know what? It's could make sense either way, whatever he chooses, especially in his case. I did forget to ask you when we were talking about the calendar and the athletes that signed up, Ironman and their pro series. Do you think they are blindsided by this announcement and all the athletes that signed up? I think that's a huge question.
They might well be in just the numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers of top athletes, because like the top line is that pretty much every top athlete in the non-drafting scene has signed up to the T100 series, and that's categorical. So whether Ironman will mind so much, we know that the whole thing around Ironman is like, honestly, how much emphasis do they place on the pro racing scene, really and truly? And obviously they have a new CEO in place now. I don't know if you've had the chance to chat to him yet or heard from what he has to say.
Oh, I would love to have him on the podcast. That would be a good conversation.
Yeah, so we need to find out how high the professional side is in his estimation, and also is what Messick did. That final parting shot. The benign. What's the expression around the benevolent dictator? As he's walking out the door, he's just chucking him a bone and giving him a few $100 million, and maybe the Ironman Pro Series. Who knows what will happen to it? What we can say for sure is it creates opportunity there as well for other athletes, and in some ways it's sort of a bit almost like a feeder tour, isn't it? It feels almost like a feeder tour to the T100 in terms of athletes being able to make a name for themselves. There's $1.7 US more up for grabs.
Yep.
It's not a closed shop, and I know T100 is not supposedly a closed shop either, but actually realistically this year not every athlete gets a chance to race for PTO. So Ironman's open, more money on the line, more races where there's not going to be such high quality opposition because they're all going to be off doing the 100K distance. Sponsors are going to love it because you're going to be an Ironman champion. In some ways, for the likes of Joe Skipper, for the likes of, sorry, bias here, UK British bias here, but Nikki Bartlett, Laura Siddell, Fenella Langridge, the people that are not racing PTO, and actually to me jump up as the names of people that are going to do well at Ironman racing, if they so choose to do that. There's great opportunities. So
I totally agree.
One door shuts, the other opens. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the PTO T100. Who are your favorites coming into this series? Who does it suit?
Okay. Women first, yeah?
Yeah, women first.
Okay. So I think the women's, as I look at the women's, and I did a PTO video on this, and it's so hard to look past Anne Howe, Ashley Gentle, Lucy Charles Barkley. They're your top three over the 100. You've obviously got Taylor Knibb coming after the Olympics, and is the potential game changer. And then Flora Duffy potentially. She's one of their so-called hot shots, right? Flora Duffy's on the list for a hot shot.
Yep.
Yeah. So obviously you would think they would be able to influence. But then when I look down the list of names, let's say the challengers to that, Paula Finley, ever consistent over the middle distance specialist. Imo Simmons, fantastic middle distance athlete, had a great season, third in Iron 70.3 Worlds last year, and back now healthy. Emma Pallant-Brown, one of the fastest runners. Chelsea Sadaru, again, former Ironman world champion, but also one of the quickest runners who you feel should be able to do a job at 100K. Tamara Jewett, one of the quickest runners who can take anybody down over the final leg. India Lee strong, always strong and always up there, regular top there. So actually underneath those top women, anybody could challenge and get their name in the fray early. But also I think we need to look at the way there are 8 races, your best 3 plus the grand final count. You can be quite strategic about this as well. So you can be strategic about how you get the points. And also it suits athletes that are robust, resilient, and can last the year from March to November. Now, let's take Alistair Brownlee as an example on the men's side, just because. But Alistair Brownlee won the World Triathlon Series. This is obviously a 2-time Olympic champion. He only won the World Series twice. And the last time he won it was 2011. Because he couldn't stay fit, really. I mean, that was the upshot. He couldn't stay fit to do enough races to win the WTCS. Now, this T100 is effectively built on pretty much the same basis, except they're racing longer. And actually, they're kind of committed to do more races than what the short course athletes were on that. So you've got to look at it and say, are there athletes like Daniela Ryf, right, who is 5-time Ironman world champion? Do we see her being consistent enough over the series? Perhaps do we see her even be quick enough? I don't know. I think that's question. The athletes that can peak for that big day, like Ryf did in Roth last year, it may not suit them, but it might suit the consistent ones like Findlay, for example, who can go out and deliver on middle distance again and again. Because you're going to have to park your ego, right? You can't peak for every race.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you have to work with your coach to say, I need to be okay with being at 90%.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is for every athlete. So, yeah. What do you think? Who's your picks?
I think.
And honestly, have I sit on the fence? If I'm sitting on the fence, tell me, because I don't want to be doing that either. So.
No problem. I loved it. I love that you gave me the 3 favorites right away. I didn't want to put you too much under the spot for your predictions, but I think I was going to ask you, do you think a lot of those athletes will kind of wait for those later season races to peak? That's what I'm curious about. Do you think in Miami we'll see everybody gung-ho for like an early season win to pick up some points? Or do you think a lot of them will try and ease into the season and pick up the points later on?
Mixed bag. If you want one name, I'll give you Ashley Gentle.
Okay.
I'll give you Ashley Gentle because I think she understands the distance, and her coach understand how to navigate the season and
Mm,
focus just on that. And I don't, and she's also, I believe, is not going to be one that's going to be distracted by Ironman racing, because that's the other thing. Some of these women, I believe, will get distracted. Sorry, what was the question?
I was just thinking, do you think they'll peak later on? But I love that. Yeah, Ashley Gensel.
I'm going to say you need to be, if you're one of the contracted athletes that's contracted to do the 6 races, and you're not one of the Olympic ones, you want to be getting in some good races early on,
Yeah.
because that gives you more options for later on in the season.
Yeah.
In terms of, let's say, if you are someone who wants to have a go at the Ironman World Championship, get your early T100 races in Miami and Singapore. And so, yes, Miami, Singapore in April, and then California, which we're hoping is going to be Alcatraz, right? We hope. Get
Yeah.
those done, get some good results in. And then if you get 3 good results there, that almost buys you it until you race in Oman in well, we're saying Oman, okay, we'll stick with that, in November. So and also you're not going to come up against those athletes post Olympic Games
Yeah.
who are either going to be fried or firing, but we know they're going to be doing something. Like, there's no way Taylor Knibb's going to be there and not blow the race to bits one way or the other. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, good point. Good point. All right. I love that. Dark horses for the women. Who are you looking at? I love that you mentioned Imogen Simmons. That's one for me who I've been loving seeing really come back to full form. Um, then Taylor Spivey was my wild card, I think. I love seeing her on that list.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a very fair call. I mean, although it's going to be a bit of a step into the unknown for her, and I guess we're going to have to see how the Olympics. But I guess for Taylor Spivey, she may not get Olympic selection, so she may be there earlier than we think now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You want a wild card name?
Real wild card. Yeah.
Marjolaine Pierre, continuing to improve and capable young athlete, capable of delivering and getting better every year. There you go.
That's a good one. All right. I think we move on to the men here. No, Christian Blumenfeld. Does this give somebody the chance to take #1 in the world in the PTO rankings? Who do you think takes it at the end of the series?
Uh, I think Blumenfeld would have been the favorite, right? I think if he focused on this, given the way we know he can race and races well multiple times. I know it didn't all work out for him last year, but he still put in some pretty damn impressive performances. You'd have thought this was made for him, but obviously he's not there, right?
Yeah.
So I got to pick somebody else.
Unless you think he's getting wild card, he's getting enough wild cards. He's just kind of.
I don't. I genuinely don't. And I also think if you turn down the PTO contract, I wonder how that sits in terms of you being offered wildcards further down the line as well, because there needs to be a bit of. I can see there being a bit of loyalty at play here.
That makes sense.
Um, I'm looking at the list here. I think an athlete like Rico Bogan could do well here. Okay. Um, obviously on the rise, having won 70.3 worlds, but young and the ability to recover quickly. That puts him in a good. Jason West, there's definite opportunities for that guy over this distance. He's done well here on the 100K before, and we know, he's not going to be in awe of anybody anymore, and he's had good results. I mean, it was Milwaukee last year, wasn't it, where he was storming through the field. I think you've got to be looking at. Do you know what? This is so hard. This is so hard to call who is your out and out favorite. And I think that is something that the PTO should really make the most of. It's just so open,
Yes.
like if Martin Van Riel, for example, was fit and delivering the form that we have seen him deliver. I think he has the fastest middle distance time of all time or something, right? And but if that guy, if he could get himself into shape, he could run away with a series. With Alistair Brown, who stay robust and resilient enough for the racing, you'd have to say probably unlikely, given a history of the last 2 years. So you'll probably rule him out. Likewise, Javier Gomez, you'd probably say it's an unfortunate no.
I'm going to stop you there, Tim. You got to talk to me a little bit more about Alistair and Javier Gomez. Yesterday, when I was talking to my other podcast co-host, Brent, he said near impossible Do you agree with that? Near impossible for those two to pull it off?
Who said it was near impossible?
My other co-host on the podcast, Brent. Brent,
Brett. Uh, okay. I would agree with Brent.
oh,
No, I genuinely think it's near impossible to pull it off for either of them. However, I would love to see it. I would just love to see both of them be able to stay fit to race
me too.
and be competitive. And I feel like if we can get that, then that's going to make things really interesting. But I don't think I had this conversation with somebody the other day. There was a time when Jan Frodeno, Javier Gomez, Alistair Brownlee, they could be out of action, they could be gone missing, but then you knew if they turned up on the race start, they would be the favorites for the race, and it kind of didn't matter who else was there. I genuinely think that time has now passed, and for a long time, I would always be the person who would back Brownlee, Gomez, and Frodeno. I honestly think now, from what I saw last year, the game has moved. It's moved on now. So I'm not saying they can't be competitive, but when I'm looking down the names of the list here, Magnus Ditlev, Sam Laidlow, and Laidlow is just fascinating as to what he is going to deliver right this year on
Yeah.
and wherever he chooses to deliver it. Fred Funk. I think Aaron Royal can do well here. I think Rudy can do well as well. Like we said, Jason West. So it's not just the fact that those guys are now. Oh, and Ben Canute, who I definitely wanted to give a mention to as well, because I think Ben has that experience of racing the series, and
Yeah.
he's just that punchy performer who's just going to give it his. I remember him duking it out with Blumenfeld in the 70.3 Worlds in St George, and he's got that he's just kind of got that thing where you feel like as a series he can do well. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think with all of those guys in the mix, for Brownlee and Gomez, it's every race is a tough race, right? Every race is going to be hard for them. So I think near impossible, Brent is probably right.
Ooh.
As much as I hate to say it,
But you know what I love, and I think I haven't heard too many people talk about it, but they're in it on the swim. I think that they still have that swim speed to stay there and start the race at least in a position to go for the win. Where I think a lot of the other athletes, the swim could be a downfall for them on both the men's and the women's side. That PTO distance, it's 2K instead of 1.9, just a little bit longer. And it's in relatively the terms of the whole distance, it is more of a percentage of the race and more important, I think. And I think that's where they do have that advantage is the swim. So they'll be in it, I think. But I agree with you. It's going to be tough for them.
I 100% agree with you on the swim, and this is why I didn't mention Sam Long there. And I think the swim costs him here. But then I need to caveat that slightly as well because of the way the bike, and we've seen that 100K races, where the bike can just go crazy. With the 20-meter draft rule, that can start changing things. There's nowhere to hide on the bike anymore.
No.
But then you've also got that looped course where you've got the dynamic of athletes never been that far away anyway. So we don't really understand. We don't really know how 100K works yet. And I don't think the athletes know either. And that, again, makes it really exciting. So let's. But good point. Good point on the swim. If you can't swim, you're in trouble here.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why Lionel's. Maybe that's why Lionel's not got a contract.
I think that's a good good intuition there. I actually think one of the criticisms I forgot to bring up there earlier about the courses is wanting to see like more variation on the like the bike course, for example, and the run course. And I think that's where if Escape from Alcatraz is the race, having a tough, hard, hilly bike course like that and a hard run course could be amazing to watch, and where Sam Long actually might really be a favorite for the win at a race like that. So excited about that. I can't pass over wild cards on the men's because we mentioned the hot shots, Martin Van der Riel's on there. Is there anyone else you're looking at here who's like, I mean, you said Rico Bogan as well, but anyone else hidden in there that you're like, oh, I reckon nobody's thinking about him?
I think we've covered a lot of them. I think Daniel Bakkegaard can be. He's not a hot shot, but he's there on merit in terms of his ranking. But I
Yeah.
think he's a consistent former who's is proven at the middle distance. So I think he can do well. In terms of wildcards, I think if, for example, you get the likes of Yuri Kulin called up early on, and he's only just on the bubble, and you've got to really feel sorry for athletes that missed out on the contract by one or two ranks, because it's like it's 10, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars that they've missed. And this is
Yeah.
where I do have some criticism for the PTO. And I think, for example, I know Sarah True, who would just have missed out on the women's side, even though she is now ranked, if you look at the rankings now, and I know it wasn't when they did the cut, but she had no contact from them. So I think they need to sort out some of the communication issues there. A bit of criticism for that. And that's partly because of the disparity, because if you miss that bubble, forget a contract, you're staring across the fence going, oh my days, such a huge difference. But I think, obviously, if Yuri Kulin, who's the Dutch flyer, he would have the bit between his teeth if he got the opportunity. I'm more excited about like the PTO ranked athletes here than I am honestly about any Olympians who might come across afterwards. And I saw there was, I posted something on Twitter, and Greg Bennett, who's the Olympic medalist, I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah.
Actually, did Greg ever win an Olympic, or did he come fourth?
Be
Might
fourth.
come fourth, actually. He came fourth, yeah, in Athens, didn't he? Sorry, yeah. I'm bigging him up even more. But he won plenty of big races, Greg.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he felt that the idea that you can get Olympic athletes in towards the end of the series, which is effectively what they've done,
Yeah.
what PTO has done, actually diminishes it. And it's like you should be one in, all in, really. So I'm more excited about the guys that could come from the rankings than I am about somebody like a Leo Berger, who I'm sure will do brilliantly. If he comes across post-Olympics, he's got all the tools to make an absolute whacking impact. And let's be honest, if Berger won the Olympic title, he'd be the first name down for a wild card. He could then race he's not going to be doing full distance Ironman. He could go and race the next 3 races, bang up a load of points. He could turn up for the grand final, win the whole shebang, and we could have got all the way through August and no one's even spoken about him as a T100 contender, and all of a sudden he's walked away with the whole thing. So this is when, pre-chat, we were saying like subplots and all of the things that could happen.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. One thing I did wanted to quickly touch on was around the likelihood of how it played, like how important was the grand final, because that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so I did a couple of back of a fag packet maths on this just prior to our chat. If you win 3 races, okay. So here's one scenario. If you win 3 races, or let's say you go into the grand final and the second place dude has had second place 3 times, you then have to finish 4th or below. You're as long as you finish 4th, like that's the lowest place you can finish if that guy wins, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So just that to give you a bit of scope there. And the other thing was, if the grand final, you have to perform there, because if you win 3 races, okay, go in and then crash out, let's say in the grand final, for someone to beat you, they would need to win the grand final, but then only have an average finishing position of like 6th in the other 3 races. So if that makes so basically what we're saying, and we've seen it with WTCS, which is kind of similar, where Dorian Connix won last year. Somebody can come out of the blue in the grand final and scoop a lot. So therefore, it's almost like don't put too much stake in those early season races, especially because only 3 count. So you could have a situation where Ashley Gentle wins 3 and Anne Haug wins another 3. So they go in tied, right? So,
yeah. Oh, brilliant. No, I'm glad.
Anyway, bit of kind of, that's just me kind of playing with the numbers and thinking what could happen. So, yeah.
I think that's exciting to hear, that, if most likely there probably won't be the case of somebody's just ran away with it. I think that's a very low chance, especially with the caliber. Yeah. So I think that's awesome. And honestly, your point about Leo Berger coming in and possibly taking the title after the Olympics, I totally agree. And it could ruin their narrative. PTO might have played themselves a little bit on that one. But we can kind of move from there. That's perfect onto wildcards in general. And giving them out, there might be a lot available, as athletes don't have to race every race. What do you think about wildcards in general, and then also World Triathlon involvement with selecting the wildcards? We saw them post about that.
Yeah, I think well, obviously they do have to have wildcards, and I think it's good that they do. I think it's good that it's not. I mean, the alternative, if you've got no wildcards, it's a closed league effectively, and I
Yeah,
think that is wrong. Athletes should have the opportunity. In terms of the wildcards, I think it should be picked. Really, they should be looking at the rankings, and it should be the next one off the rank effectively, because otherwise, I feel you're going to get athletes that are going to get passed over just because they don't have a high profile, or just because they don't have a big social media following, or because they haven't come through an Olympic route. And actually, some of those athletes are the ones like a Lionel Sanders, right, who the fans most warm to and can most associate with, and actually, like it's a sporting event. It's not. I know Chris Kermode, sports entertainment. Yes, it is entertainment, but it's not WWE wrestling, right?
yeah,
We shouldn't be just picking people because of like their notoriety. Um, so I think that the way the wild card should be done in an absolute meritocracy. I don't really understand the World Triathlon view of we're going to help pick them. I
yeah,
don't really get that. I think World Triathlon's role in this, which I think is good, is to crown a world champion. I'm on board with that. I think they want to help grow the sport and bring people in, which I've spoken to them a lot. We've probably spent 40 minutes talking to Chris Gemmell, who's the World Triathlon marketing guy and former sixth place Olympian and everything. So on Tuesday, and their message and like the whole raison d'etre of World Triathlon is very different from the PTO.
yeah.
And their mission is to try and grow the sport. So they want to be on board with PTO and support them in this is kind of what they're doing. So I'm kind of agree with all of that. Like, I don't think there's a massive amount in it per se for World Triathlon here. I do feel it's a challenge to their own series, not just in terms of potentially dragging athletes away from it to a more lucrative series, but the WTCS obviously needs its own venues around the world as well. And there are only a certain number of host cities that are prepared to put up their hand and say, we've got money to spend hosting triathlon events.
Yeah.
And great if, like this, what's the saying? The rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
Great if that happens, and then and more locations go, we want a triathlon there. We can't have a PTO T100 event. We're going to have a World Series event, but that remains to be seen if that happens. So, kind of on one hand, unlikely bedfellows. Glad we've got I'm glad. I much prefer this to the kind of Ironman out doing their own thing as a private corporation, just from a pure sporting perspective. But I think we'll have to see how it develops over the year.
That's so interesting. That was one of my later questions is like, what does World Triathlon get out of this partnership? But yeah, I'm glad you answered it a little bit there. And I think I heard Sam say once, once in a podcast somewhere that, they might one time have racing like right alongside the WTS World Triathlon races. Do you think that might be a case where we have short course athletes racing alongside long course athletes at the same venue at the same time kind of thing? Would that be good for World Triathlon to have more of like these big festival races?
So I think World Triathlon have kind of caught with a number of hats on, right? And they're really they need to be the governors of the sport, and they have the Olympics as like they're the governor, they're the international federation. They have all the national federations reporting into them. That's a very different role for being race organizers and organizing a race series. And there is part of me that feels that they would love it if the PTO actually almost became their commercial arm in some senses. Now, this is a ways off, but actually, if you could see that kind of partnership. If this partnership works well, you could see it becoming more embedded, or I could, so that the PTO then take on the running of both the T100 plus the WTCS, which is the Olympic distance. Now, the Olympic distance obviously could change as well, right? We don't know what's going to happen in future Olympic Games. If for example, that goes shorter and goes to a sprint distance, or a sprint, if they have just sprint and mixed relay, for example, and not the standard distance, then perhaps you could have those two races because the T100 and the sprint are further apart, and
Sure.
So, yeah, like I think there's some evolution that is going to happen 100%. But which way it'll go, I'm not quite at the moment. That's me gazing through a crystal ball a bit on that one. So
That's what I got you on here for. I love Tim's crystal ball on the Twitter. You always have some good insights, and you just think critically about this stuff. And sometimes, just me doing the news and stuff on my channel, I just feel like I'm just like facts, just relaying facts. Whereas like I love people who have great opinions and think critically and long term about it. So appreciate it. Okay, so we've heard some criticisms. We've talked it up. We think it's amazing, but we've also heard some criticisms.
yeah,
A couple of ones I wanted to bring up
yeah.
was prize money now changing completely, going $25,000 for first place. Switching that up instead of the $100,000. What do you think about prize money in general? It's a lot more. It's spread out now, down lower. That's interesting.
It is interesting, but I think it goes back to our conversation around contracts, and it's just how do you piece up the puzzle, or how do you cut the cake, basically. And
Yep.
it's just the athletes have got more money in contracts, so therefore the prize money goes down a little bit, and there's obviously more events as well. So overall, I mean, I think we just need to look at that overall figure of 7 million, and we say there's 3 million on contracts, there's 2 million in prize prize money over the series, and then there's another 2 million in that bonus pool.
Yeah.
And that is a hell of a lot of money that is going to go to, let's be honest, a fairly limited pool of athletes. And so those athletes are super quids in. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to shed a tear because the top prize in any one event has now dropped down to 25 grand. I think if you compare it to what Ironman will be paying for most 70.3s, it's still, I mean, what are we looking at? We're looking at $250,000 per event. I mean, that's sort of blows every Ironman race pretty much out of the water still.
Yeah.
Plus you have the bonus pool at the end. And, another thing that we haven't talked around, and again, this is one that I've reached out for the PTO for an answer for. To be fair to the PTO, they're normally pretty good at getting back to me. They haven't got back to me on this. What happens to the end of year rankings? Not the bonus pool for the T100, the end of year rankings, because there's another $2 million there on the line.
Yeah.
Okay. As well, which bumps it up in theory to, well, we're going up we're $9 million, nearly 10 million at this point. Now, who's going to be claiming the money from the end of year rankings? You've got to think it's going to be the same athletes again, because the events that are going to be used for the ranking have to be the T100 events, because you can work it out. If they don't include the T100s in the rankings, you have an end of year rankings, which will be a bunch of people that didn't race the T100. It makes no sense. So, yeah. So there's even more money for them.
That is crazy. Actually,
Travis, how's your 100 times in the swim at the moment? Because the thing with me and you need to we
I
need to
know.
get some training done, because it could be an opportunity.
It might be worth committing the next 10 years.
It might be worth it,
yeah. Yeah. No, I loved your answer about the prize money. Totally agree. I think they're just going to make the narrative around like, if these athletes, if athletes get that top 10 in this series, they get another, contract, which is worth X amount. I think they'll be or, and of course the bonus pool at the end. Like, this athlete is now moved up into third in the rankings, which means now they could earn, X amount with that bonus pool. I think they'll definitely focus on that versus like hey, they won 25 grand. So.
Right. And actually that was a point that you pulled up in your previous video that I hadn't actually noted. Is it right that the top 10 in the end of season for the T100 then qualify for the next year's T100? Has that been confirmed?
Yeah, it's on the website. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That is just another reason to do well at this tour. And if you do well, you're not only lining your pockets for this year, but you're lining it for next year as well.
Absolutely. And then that leads me perfect onto the last criticism I have of it. Unfair and unattainable to get into the T100 if you're outside of it. Like, even as Yuri Kulin, who's just outside of it, if he's not racing these races and getting wild cards and getting these high points that we've seen from PTO races, because it's a diamond tier level event, is anybody else going to get into these unless they're getting those wild cards?
No, is the answer. It's not just getting a wild card. You have to get your wild card, and you have to seize that opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like, it's like the golden shot. If you don't seize that opportunity there and then, you haven't got the luxury of a contracted athlete where you've got eight events to get it right. You've got to get it right from the get-go on that one time. That's some pressure. And also what I hope they've done is, with all the money that they've got going towards the athletes. I hope they've kept a bit back to make sure that any wild cards that they do pick, they can at least be financed to get themselves to the event, that they can finance them to get to the event. Because there's a difference being a wild card for an event and having 6 weeks notice. And I believe I did get this back from the PTO that the contracted athletes have to say a month in advance that they're going to race.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
therefore, the wild cards. So you would hope that the wild cards would be then given a full month's notice, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're not, imagine there's a marked difference between giving a few weeks' notice with some money to get yourself there than there is to being it dropped on you with a few days notice and
Good.
saying, "Oh, it's halfway around the world." Oh, well, oh, thanks very much. What chance, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. How important do you think the broadcast is to get right in the commentary? I think you touched on it a little bit there at the beginning. I think this is going to make us want to be like, are we pumped to watch the next T100 race?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it's something that's. I mean, Sam's said this, hasn't he? It's a work in progress, and I genuinely believe it is a work in progress.
yeah,
I think it's important that they look at trying to do things with a freshness, if I'm honest,
okay,
and that may be like not just the same old faces, and it might be bringing people in from outside the sport. And that might not be middle-aged male anchors, for example. That might be somebody a little bit different than that. I
yeah,
think we've been quite male dominated in certainly there's criticisms of that from a PTO board perspective, for example. I know for a one time when they were making recruitment, it was, oh, here's another white guy being, and I know the sport is very much of that kind of ilk anyway. And okay, we shouldn't, everyone on merit and things, but I do feel that given with such a sport that prides itself on on equality of sexes, that should certainly be reflected in the commentary team, and I think they'll know that and they'll work towards that. So that's important. But
okay.
yeah, just I don't think any of the commentators they've had are bad so
No,
far at all, and I think it's a challenging job. And also, I think that everyone that they have had on has improved as well over the races.
true.
So yeah, I will watch with interest to see. I try not to be too critical of the commentators, but
Me either.
sometimes it's hard though, right?
That's true. It is a hard job. I couldn't imagine. But one guy who is now middle-aged, who's made a post yesterday that got a lot of people dreaming and fantasizing, I think, is Jan Frodeno. Do you think? Yeah, I don't think he's going to be racing again personally. I think it was a good post for engagement, but he could be one who's putting his hand up for commentary, I reckon. And another one like him, probably Sebastian Kienle, maybe would be a good option.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think there's definitely opportunities for summarizing roles,
Yeah.
and also you've got English language and also German language there, and Frodeno. I mean, the guys, well, and probably Keeley as well. They probably speak about 8 different languages, so they could probably pick a broadcaster they want and go and be the expert summarizer on any of those. So, yeah, like 100% think that both of those two are articulate, passionate, opinionated, which is important, and can do a very good job. But I think also there are plenty of women who could do that as well,
Yeah.
and so we should get a few of those in as well. So yeah, it would be interesting to see who they go for.
Yeah.
Get yourself on, Travis.
Oh man, I'd love it, but I would get so nervous, I bet. But other questions I have for you. Race Ranger, how important do you think its role is, the fairness of the race, and then speaking of that, doping, you can maybe roll into doping and that huge topic afterwards.
Sure. I mean, I love Race Ranger. There's, anyone who's followed anything I've written or tweeted or whatever over the years will know that. From the very initial concept when James Alvery first launched it and said it to me, I thought it's a great idea. And everything I said, what about this? What about this to him? He just came back and yeah, we've got that answer. We got that answer. We got that answered. I sat down with Ironman in Kona and they told me it can't work because of this, this, and this. Literally 2 weeks later, James like, no, they're wrong. Bang, bang, bang. Those were the solutions.
Wow.
And anyone who's seen it in action understands what a great tool it is. Now, the caveat to this is it has to be applied judiciously, and it genuinely has to be kind of the referees need to know what they're doing with it, understand how it works, and it's not carte blanche to cheat essentially, because because unless the system is adhered to and penalties are handed out when people do encroach or they're made to pass, then it falls down. So it has to be enforced, is the point that I am trying to get to. All right, having the technology, which I think is pretty robust now, but you have to enforce it. What I do know, and this is intriguing, is that the data it now spits out doesn't just, it's, for a long time it was lights only. So you would see if somebody was encroaching in the draft zone, or you see if they backed out.
Okay.
Now it will tell you, and I've seen the data on this,
No
how
way.
many seconds someone is in the draft zone per race, for example.
Brilliant.
All of the good stuff that we have wanted to know for ages. And I've seen
Wow.
a spreadsheet, and I kid you not, that showed me an athlete that was in the draft zone for 15 seconds of an Ironman race. And I seen that on that same spreadsheet, there was an athlete who spent 90% of the time cheating. Right. I
Oh
was like,
my.
wow. Right.
Wow.
Now, whether that should and could be made public anyway, I don't know, because that's a whole other area. But
Oh
all
yeah.
it does to me is it shows the power of that device,
Wow.
that piece of technology, and anyone who knew about that knew it was coming down the track anyway. That was always the plan, because it wasn't just a snapshot in time. It was always, can we get a picture of how an athlete races? Are they racing are they basically pushing the envelope all the time and always in the draft zone until a TO appears? Or are they trying to race fairly? And that's what that is the information that we now have, or at least they have, the race organizers has. To be honest, that's a question: who does have it? Do Race Ranger have it? Do the organizers own it? Like, it's a fascinating area. So sorry, you could get me on Race Ranger forever, but
Oh, I
that's
love that.
yeah, so that's why it has to be, to me, it has to be part of the system, but it needs to be enforced. And I don't believe PTO have given a drafting penalty out in all their races yet.
Yeah.
And we know there have been coaches stood on the side of those racetracks screaming at athletes and calling them an
Yeah.
effing this and effing that. So we know that there has been problems with drafting. So PTO, you need to get that sorted for 24.
I agree. I heard that firsthand, and fans too. It keeps, man, it keeps the refs accountable because everybody's seeing it now. So yeah, I think it's great. And then doping, how big do you think that is, that, when Sam unveils this with World Triathlon and the new system that they've got?
Listen, I think with anti-doping, I think with Ironman and World Triathlon and the PTO, there will be one common denominator in all three, and that is the ITA.
Mm.
Okay, who are the contracted testing authority? I'm questioning myself. It's ITA, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It is ITA. Yeah. It's all right. Do you know what it is? The Athletics Integrity Unit has been releasing a load of press releases about athletics today, and
Okay.
that's it's trivia. But sorry. So
Yeah.
the International Testing Agency, the ITA, they work with Ironman, they work with World Triathlon, they work with PTO. They're contracted by all of them. So really, there is every opportunity for those organisations to come together. And then what effectively I believe they do, or they have already, they create testing pools. The athletes are in the testing pools. That allows them to be tested out of competition, because you're in the testing pool, you give your hour a day on the whereabouts, and
Yep.
therefore they can implement a proper out of competition testing program, as well as testing them in competition. And we know, an in competition test is basically an idiot test, right? If you fail when in competition, then yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like they just need to get their ducks aligned. Whether Ironman will ever play ball with that, possibly possibly unlikely. And then it's incumbent on the ITA just to get that sorted. So effectively, World Triathlon, that has its casting pool at the moment, we will see a lot of the PTO contracted athletes, I would think, moved into that pool, or moved into effectively a similar pool. And they'll cross-reference with what the Ironman pool, and then that will hopefully put everybody, put it this way, you can't have a situation where a contracted athlete can't be tested at a competition. And likewise, if you've got 30 athletes below the contracted athletes in the rankings, they need to be able to be tested at a competition as well. So they
Yeah.
can't dope with impunity till they get themselves to a level. And
Totally agree.
you know,
Yeah.
but you can only do that if the people are in testing pools, because if they're not in a testing pool, they don't have to answer the door, right? This is the point.
Yep.
Because you can't, it's human rights. You can't be watched 24 hours a day. So you have to be in the pool to be able to give your 1 hour a day.
Love
There
it.
you go. Sorry if I
No,
labored the point, but
you didn't. You hit it right on the head, I think.
yeah.
All right. Got a few final questions here, and I
Okay.
always sneak in some rapid fire if I can. All right. Do you think at the end of this year, people still remember Kona and Nice the most, or are you thinking the fans are going to be talking about the PTO T100?
I feel they, as much as we have champion T100 here, and we are both super behind it, I know they will be talking about the Ironman World Champions at the end of the year, and a big part of that is because of the Ironman brand and
Mm,
age group racing around it, and
yeah,
everybody understands what that means and what that is.
love it. I think maybe the
So,
diehard fans will, if there's an amazing narrative throughout the perfect one that they get, I think for me, I think the T100 might take it there if it, especially with like Lucy not racing Nice, for example. I think it's possible. Um, but then
it is possible. I agree. It is possible. If you had Lucy, yeah, if you had Lucy winning T100 and you had a complete outsider winning these, which random person winning these, which could happen, yeah, then definitely Lucy could become the more higher profile, you know,
yeah, that's it was just
success.
her statement and everything made me think of that. So yeah,
It's a good point.
awesome.
Good point.
And then you said age group racing there and how important that was. How critical do you think that is for the PTO this year and in the future?
It's. I think it's probably like a. I'm just plucking a number percent. I'm going to go. It's like a 30%, like
Okay.
a critical for them. The big piece for them to work is the broadcast pro piece. So they need to get money in from sponsors. They need to get money around broadcast and advertising and the like. And I think the age group part of that is supplementary, both in terms of bringing in some extra revenue for them. And they're never going to be able to compete with Ironman on it, but if they can bring in something, but it also brings bodies to locations.
Yeah.
And that's going to be vital for, I mean, London would be a classic one, because London they almost have a blank canvas where they're going to race in London to produce an amazing spectacle, but they need to get fans there, and fans are not going to travel there. Not many fans are going to travel there unless they are already age group racing or they're supporting someone who's age group racing because of where that location is. So I think that's important for all of the different venues. So it's really important, and they've really got their work cut out to be able to achieve that.
Yeah.
And it's so much of it will depend on local organizing committees, and those are going to be different in each. It's not as it's the PTO is not thousands of people going round from
Yeah.
location to location. They are reliant on the people delivering the race in each location, and that then blends into how many age groupers you get signed up, how it's marketed locally. So yeah, that's a tricky nut for them to crack, no doubt.
It'd be interesting to see how it evolves throughout the years. Like, is it something that keeps increasing, or do we see the kind of same thing every year? All right, Tim, thank you so much for your time. This was so awesome. I've got a few last rapid fire questions to ask you. Five good ones here. What do you love most about pro triathlon?
Right now, going into 24, the unpredictability of what we're about to see. That would be the biggest thing. I cannot tell you. I have no clue what is going to happen this year, and I'm excited about that.
Brilliant. What do you hate most about pro triathlon? Or what's a pet peeve?
Long-standing pet peeve would be I wish the organizations would work more closely together, and try and align together. And I appreciate it's probably never going to happen, but I feel that more consolidation, working together would be a far better place, because if you're coming to this sport from the outside, it takes some getting your head around, and we 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 uh we would prefer it to be a much simpler space to understand.
Totally agree. Is this the best era of triathlon though?
The best era?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Like, I'm going to say yes, because I'm going to be positive, you know? And I think, go back to the Brownie comment that I said earlier, there's no better time to be a long distance triathlete. Um, there has been epic racing in the past. You know, the London 2012 Olympics, the men's race was probably going to be the best triathlon you're ever going to see. I'm saying that as a Brit, in front of 250,000 people. Brownlee brothers on the podium, like, that's never going to be beaten, even if somebody runs a 25-minute 10K. Like, that's still going to be the best ever race. So, and then obviously, you know, you're never going to beat the Iron War of '89 between Alan and Scott. It just isn't gonna. It's just never going to happen. It's never going to happen for some people. So, it's an impossible comparison. But in terms of the eras as a whole, then yes, we should be positive. The sport is moving on. It is evolving. It is developing. And you know, like, if you and I can't be excited about that, then what chance we got?
That's so true. All right. Would you rather watch a sprint finish or domination in the grand final?
Sprint finish.
Me too. And then last one, huge one. Who is the coolest triathlete out there right now?
Oh my days. That's quite hard.
Right.
That's quite hard. Who's the coolest? Oh my God. God, now.
You know who I think?
Go on. Yeah, help me out here.
I think it's Christian.
Do you?
In his own quirky way, I think he is
Yeah.
just very different. I love him.
Yeah. You know what I love about that guy, so I'll agree with you because it's an easy out for me. But what I love about that guy is he is never he loves the sport, and he's not afraid to show that he loves the sport, and he's never too cool for the sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So he will sit and try with anybody at any time, and
Yep.
he's genuinely passionate about it, rather than it just being something that he's done and he's passe about it or whatever.
One
And
of my
that's what I like more than anything, because I think that's what the fans appreciate, because they love that. And if they have an opportunity to speak to one of their heroes, they want that same vibe back, you know, and I think he delivers that. So 100%, yeah, he's a super cool guy.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you'd have asked me who's the coolest guy in general triathlon, I obviously would have said yourself. So, but, you know, you did say pro triathlon, so you ruled yourself out.
Thanks, Tim. I'll have you on again. I'll pay you afterwards. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. That was awesome.
No problem at all. It's good to chat. Thank you.